Hey guys, what's up? In the last video I've made Superman. And if you've seen till the end of the video, you might ask yourself, where is KRYPTO? Where's the dog? The dog! Where's the dog? So don't you worry guys, I will get the dog before he kills Clark Kent's parents' cows. So, to make KRYPTO, I'm gonna need a wooden plate, some Cosclay and some wire. Just like with Superman, I'm gonna need the wooden plate to make the base of the figure. But since in my opinion the wooden plate is a bit too short, I rolled up some piece of clay and used a large PVC pipe to stanch out a circle with a radius of 4 centimeters. And after having thrown it in the oven, I glued it on top of the wooden plate. I then cut out another thin clay strip and glued it around the 4 cm clay piece. That way the base would appear more like a pedestal. Basically, I just did the exact same thing that I did with Superman's base. And to add some more details, just like I did with Superman, I rolled out a 1 mm clay sheet, glued it on top of the 4 cm clay circle, and then added some lines for details. And with the base out of the way, I had to do the basic wire skeleton of the dog. For that, I made a very beautiful sketch, as you can see. I mean, wow, look at that. Anyway, I had to do that sketch so that I would get KRYPTO's scale next to the Superman figure right. I kinda had to eyeball it, but I don't think anyone notices if it's a bit too small or a bit too big. Anyways, I then traced it with some wire and cut it to shape. I used aluminum wire for 3 of the legs, and for 1 of the legs I used iron wire. As you can guess, the iron wire is much harder than aluminum wire, which is good for balancing the figure. I do this to all my figures. To connect the wires together, I blended together some green stuff. Green stuff is a 2-component epoxy which, when mixed together, will dry within 10 hours. You can use it for some details on figures, but in this case, like I said, I used it to glue together the wires. I connected the wire for the main body together with the individual legs. After the green stuff was dried and the wire was glued together, I used some pliers to bend the wire into the post that I wanted the dog to be in. I purposefully left the leg with the iron wire a bit longer because I wanted the dog to appear to be flying. Now that KRYPTO is in the stance that I want him to be in, I drilled a hole into the base and stuck the iron wire into the base. And of course, I used some super glue to glue it in place. Now that the wire skeleton is done, I went ahead and used some Cosclay to cover the entire figure. I chose to make this figure completely out of Cosclay. The reason being, as I always say, is that Cosclay sticks really well to metal wire. Overall, it is far more sticky compared to Super Sculpey or Fimo, which is why it is perfect for work like this. Also, it is really flexible once baked, which will be a really big advantage for the tail and the ears. While covering it with clay, it is important to mind the anatomy of a dog. Well, technically the same thing goes for bending the wire as well, but that doesn't matter right now. Well, once the basic shape was done, I started making the fur. As you guys might know, I made a cat once. Making her fur was a bit easy because I just simply had to scratch the clay to give it a basic texture, but I couldn't do that with KRYPTO since his hair is a bit longer and more chaotic. So what I had to do to get the texture of the hair right was add a shit ton of teeny tiny clay noodles on top of the dog, which I then scratch blended together. Not much to say here other than this was the part that took the longest, especially since Cosclay is very soft and sticky. I had to keep in mind that KRYPTO is basically flying in this position, so the hair is flowing in one direction, which is why I had to keep it in mind and mimic the direction of the wind. Well, once the body, except for the tail and the head, was covered with fur, I had removed the clay from the head and put it in the oven. I did that because it would then be easier for me to sculpt the head as well as the tail without ruining any detail. Basically, once it was baked, I added the exact same piece of clay that I removed back onto the head. I also added another chunk of clay onto the front of the head to make the snout. I then worked on the basic shape of the head. For that I pressed in the area of the eyes using a round wooden clay stylus. I also added the mouth and the nose detail. As for the eyes, I rolled out some very small pieces of clay into very small balls, hardened them and then pressed them into the eye area. After that, I decided to cut open the mouth because I thought that would give it more of a characteristic. If you've seen the movie, you know how Crypto is, and I kind of feel like that this is a must-do. Anyways, I followed that up by adding some more fur onto the head. Once that was done, I flattened a thin piece of Cosclay and kind of torched it. This would now become the ears. Crypto's ears are a bit funny. One ear is up and the other one is down. So I mimicked the exact same thing. At this point in time I also added some more clay on the tail and did the exact same thing that I did with the arms and the legs, which was just scratching the shit out of it until it looked like hair. I also used some tweezers to remove some clay and further mimic the texture of the hair, since it's kind of standing up. There was some fur missing on the ears, so I further covered the hardened thin pieces of Cosclay with some more Cosclay and added the appropriate texture, using the same techniques that I used beforehand. Following that, I used yet another thin piece of Cosclay to make the tongue. To make the finishing details of the dog, I used a very thin clay strip and wrapped it around the neck. This would be the collar. The original has some metallic bolts on the collar. I was a bit too lazy to mimic that, so I just simply pressed in some holes using a ball stylus. Now it was time to make Crypto's dog tag. For this I torched yet another piece of clay, but this time I cut off a corner and cut it to shape resembling the Superman logo. Now it was just a matter of gluing it onto the collar. I almost forgot, since Crypto is seemingly appearing to be flying, I did the same thing that I did with the Superman figure. I covered the wire that was sticking out with some clay and started making some crystals to mimic the Fortress of Solitude. As for the cape, I rolled out a very thin piece of Cosclay mixed with Super Sculpey and cut it to shape. Once that was cut out, I gave it a few wrinkles and then stuck it onto the back of Crypto. I also made sure to make it appear as if it was flowing in the wind before putting it in the oven. And with that, the sculpting process is done. Onto the painting. As always, I first started with the base. I used some black acrylic wash to add some detail to the floor. And since it's only a black acrylic wash, I used a towel and wiped it a bit off. That way the floor would have more of a concrete-ish look to it. Anyways, once that was done, I started to paint the dog. Now Crypto the Superdog is white, but since I wanted to make him look a bit more realistic, I first covered the entire figure with a very light grey. On camera it appears mostly white, but trust me, in real life it does look a bit darker. Once that was dried, I dry brushed some white on it. This is very important because that way it gives the hair a little bit of a texture and some slight alterations in the coloring, which makes it appear a little bit more realistic. Moving on, I painted the nose and the paws black. I also used some more black acrylic wash for some areas of the face, since the snout of the dog isn't completely white. After that, I painted the eyes black. I had to do this in order to paint in a smaller diameter, some light grey, and then add black pupils as well. This is the way to make realistic dog eyes, at least in that size. I also painted the tongue. Once that was added, I used yet again some black acrylic wash to basically add the lips of the dog. Then it was just a matter of painting the collar. I painted the dog tag yellow and the collar itself a little bit of a darker yellow. And of course I added the small balls, or better said, some small silver points. Before I painted the cape, I had to paint the ice crystals. This was really simple, since it was the exact same thing as with the Superman figure. First white, then some light blue, and then dry brush white again, to give it that icy, frozen look. Now the final step was painting the cape. I first taped off the section where the Superman logo would go with some painter's tape, and then painted the cape red. After that was dried, I just had to do the same thing as with the Superman figure, because it's his super dog. Which was paint the emblem yellow and then add some black lines for further detail. This was a bit difficult because the logo is really small. And before I finish the figure, here's KRYPTO without the cape. Since the last step is just gluing on the cape, I used some super glue, removed the cover, and then covered the back side of the cape with the glue, to then stick it onto the back of KRYPTO. Simple as that. And yeah, what can I say? With that, the video is basically done. KRYPTO was a very nice, fast and especially fun sculpt to make. I originally had planned to release this within a week, but since you might have seen on the community tab of my channel, I've had a few problems with editing and I might release a short video talking about this later, so I had to release this a week later. But it's still relatively in time, so that's good. I think that KRYPTO turned out really well and I am very proud of the figure itself. I don't know why, but making animals or basically everything that isn't a human head turns out really well. I hope that I one day will get the grasp of how I can sculpt heads properly. Speaking of animals that I've made, if you want to, you can check out the playlist that I will link down below, where I've made other small cute animals like Pochita, Dogpool and Chimosuke. And even Turbo Granny, if you can count that. Anyways, there isn't much to say here. I really hope you did enjoy this video. If you want to see more of what I'm doing, I would suggest that you would follow my Instagram. I post regular updates there, so you won't miss what I'm doing, and I will also update you regularly on the stuff that I'm working on. Also, you can check out my channel. I have many more videos similar like this one. I would really appreciate if you did that, and otherwise it would be really nice if you liked, subscribed, shared the video, and comment down below which figure I could do next. I already have something planned, but I might keep it in mind for future videos. Anyways, since today is Sunday, I hope you have a fantastic start of the week, and I see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!